One of the most popular matchups in all of Naruto is undoubtedly Itachi vs Pain. I see why, as they're not only both very popular, but also two of the strongest Akatsuki members. I'm going to be doing my best to cover this topic extensively, to help give y'all an answer on who would actually win if Pain and Itachi were to fight. Now to preface some things about the fight, this video will cover two versions of Itachi. First we will go over a live sick Itachi, and then a hypothetical fully healthy Itachi. The win conditions for Itachi will be to incapacitate all 6 paths of pain. I know Nagato would still be alive, but this is meant to compare the paths of pain to Itachi. For Pain, the win condition is simple, and it's just to kill Itachi. There's a lot you can cover for both characters, so I want to establish what is most relevant to the fight. The most relevant factors should be their respective speeds and their various jutsu. I don't see other physical capabilities being as relevant due to both fighters having powerful jutsu that aren't based on how hard they physically hit. Due to this, speed is going to be very important to see who would be more capable of landing a technique on the other. I'm going over speed for both fighters first, as it's more straightforward, then I'll cover their techniques and how they interact, then give a conclusion on who would win. Starting with Pain's speed, we see him being able to keep up with Saitama and Naruto throughout their fight. Naruto at this point had been confirmed to have surpassed Jiraiya on multiple occasions. Not only is this just directly stated to be the case, but the whole point of Naruto's training was to surpass Jiraiya, according to Tsunade. This also just makes sense in context, as Naruto knows he has to face Pain, who had beaten Jiraiya. Now, some may try to argue that Pain was potentially weakened during the Naruto fight, due to his prior fights in unleashing a chaotic Shinra Tensei. I, however, don't actually think this matters. Pain doesn't display any better showings of his speed than his fight with Naruto, so you can't say he's any faster than that. We can only go off what we know, and the best Pain has shown us is being the same speed as Naruto. This is of course even assuming he's weakened to a relevant degree, but once again, I'm not going to go over that. Now we get to Itachi. Itachi can be a little hard to discuss, as the few times we see him fight when alive, he's confirmed to be holding back. The fight with Sasuke being the most obvious example, where Zetsu notes Itachi looks off, saying he should have been able to avoid attacks that hit him. Now I just got done saying that Pain being weakened wouldn't matter since he doesn't have anything better shown, so it may seem weird to bring this up for Itachi. The reason I'm bringing it up is I think there is good reason to believe Itachi to keep up with Pain if he went all out. Before the Uchiha clan massacre, Itachi formed a pact with Obito where he would assist Obito in taking down the Uchiha clan, and in exchange Obito would stay away from the Leaf Village. Obito actually honored this pact, and even later notes he can finally go through with attacking the village due to Itachi being gone. Obito upheld the pact well after the Uchiha clan massacre had happened, so Itachi had already fulfilled his end of the deal, meaning Obito needed another reason to honor it aside from wanting Itachi's help. If Obito could beat Itachi fairly easily, then Itachi wouldn't be a roadblock in his plan. This, along with Obito saying he would be dead if Itachi knew everything about him, implies that Itachi is a legitimate threat to Obito. Now, for Itachi to be a threat to Obito, he would need to be able to keep up with him in combat. Obito only needs to touch somebody once to win due to Kamui. So if Itachi was noticeably slower than Obito, he would just be sucked away into the Kamui dimension. Therefore, it's safe to conclude that Itachi is capable of keeping up with Obito's speed. Obito is very heavily implied to be stronger than Pain, as despite Naruto keeping up with Pain with Sage Mode alone, he says he needs Kurama's power mastered to defeat Obito. This was also Minato's whole reason for giving Naruto Kurama in the first place. So Itachi can keep up with Obito, who's considered a greater threat than Pain. This at the very least demonstrates there shouldn't be a massive gap between Pain and Itachi in speed. Now to go over abilities, as this is where the real fight is. I'm going to start with Itachi this time, as I started with Pain earlier. Itachi's strongest abilities are his various Genjutsu, Amaterasu, and Susanoo. First addressing the Susanoo. Itachi's Susanoo is the Totsuka Blade and the Yata Mirror. The Totsuka Blade being able to seal away whoever it strikes into a Genjutsu world, and the Yata Mirror being able to deflect all attacks. At first it may seem like Itachi is an easy path to victory by just sealing away all the paths with the Totsuka Blade, but I actually don't think this would work. When Orochimaru got sealed by Itachi, we see Itachi specifically struck Orochimaru's body, and not the massive Hydra in order to seal Orochimaru away. In fact, we see multiple parts of the Hydra being hit by the Totsuka Blade, and it does not get sealed. However, when Orochimaru is sealed, the Hydra is sealed along with him, which implies the Hydra is indeed connected to Orochimaru in some way. Thus, the Totsuka Blade seemingly requires hitting the main body with whatever it's sealing. You can probably see where I'm going with this, but the Paths of Pain are not the main body, as they're simply puppets for Nagato, meaning the Totsuka Blade would have a similar effect on the paths as it did to the Hydra. Now this is specifically arguing that the sealing of the Totsuka Blade wouldn't work, but that is not its only use. Even when the blade didn't seal the Hydra, it was still able to chop the heads off, so the blade could still be used to just cut the Pains down. One of Itachi's other offensive tools is the Amaterasu, the inextinguishable black flame that appears wherever Itachi's right eye is focused. The Amaterasu has several statements that hype up its power, but one of the most impressive is Zetsu stating that Itachi's right eye has the most powerful physical attack. This statement is especially impressive as Zetsu is basically a recon and information guy for the Akatsuki, and seems to have knowledge on all the Akatsuki members. It may seem like Pain is once again done with something this strong, but there are some problems. First off, we actually see Nagato use Shinra Tensei to blow away the Amaterasu when Itachi hits him with it during the war. So the Diva Pass should be okay. The Preta Pass should also be okay, since he can absorb Jutsu, so once the Amaterasu hits him, he can just suck it away. The other paths, however, have little to deal with this. We do see the summons of the Animal Path dealt with using Amaterasu during the war, and while this is a stronger Itachi, it shows they don't have any direct counter. Similarly, there isn't much the other paths have that would logically be able to counter the Amaterasu. We don't see any other of the path's abilities interact with Amaterasu, but there isn't anything the other paths have that could logically counter it. Moving on to Itachi's Genjutsu. Itachi's Genjutsu is incredibly powerful, with the strongest being the Tsukiyomi. If you're placed under Tsukiyomi, it basically results in an instant loss unless you can break it. Zetsu knows that Sasuke is completely paralyzed before he breaks the Tsukiyomi, and says Itachi can do whatever he wants while Sasuke is frozen. On top of this, Naruto tells B that being hit by Tsukiyomi is a game over, despite both of them having some Genjutsu resistance via being Jinchuriki. We do see Pain is susceptible to Genjutsu when Jiraiya is able to use Frog Song to incapacitate multiple paths of Pain. On top of this, Ma and Pa think that they can defeat Pain using Frog Song during his fight with Naruto. The only issue is, I think with how Tsukiyomi works, it wouldn't affect Pain. To be specific, I think the jutsu would hit Pain, but it wouldn't incapacitate whatever path Itachi targets. The Tsukiyomi warps the target's perception of time so that they're forced to experience long stretches of time in a split second. The issue with this is that each Pain body is simply a puppet with Nagato moving them around. So Tsukiyomi would maybe stun a Pain for a split second, and then Nagato would just continue controlling them normally. This would just end up working against Itachi, as Tsukiyomi would effectively just not work, and using Tsukiyomi takes a heavy toll on Itachi as seen in the fight with Sasuke. Now to cover Pain's main abilities. The most relevant ones being his ability to rip out souls, his ability to absorb chakra, Shinra Tensei, and Chibaku Tensei. Pain has other abilities, but if I covered all of them individually, we would be here all day, so for the sake of time, I tried to identify his strongest and most useful ones for this fight. Just to get it out of the way, Pain's Soul Rip is a totally valid path to victory. Itachi doesn't have some special resistance to this, and it is an instant win if Pain pulls it off. The only issue is, the human path needs to physically touch Itachi, and even then, the technique is not instant. Mind you, the human path is not one of the paths to have a counter to Amaterasu. Next up, Pain's chakra absorption is also a valid win con if Pain can use that on Itachi. Now, that's a big if, because he not only needs to touch Itachi, but keep Itachi in his grasp. The chakra absorb isn't instant, and is a sustained process over time. The Preta Path is one of the Pains who can counter Amaterasu, so he has that. Now, this ability does a lot more than just serving as a way to kill your opponent, as it can also absorb ninjutsu. Where it specifically may be of massive use is against the Susanoo. As ridiculous as it would probably look, there's nothing stopping Pain from absorbing the Susanoo if Itachi pulls it out. The Susanoo is listed as a ninjutsu in the databooks, and Pain can absorb every jutsu regardless of property, according to the same databooks. This is of course assuming that Pain is able to run up and touch Susanoo, but if he does that, he should be able to absorb it. This also applies to any other jutsu Itachi uses. Finally, we have the Diva Path's abilities, Shinra Tensei and Chibaku Tensei. Shinra Tensei, or Almighty Push, is one of Pain's best tools against Itachi, as it can repel Amaterasu and Itachi's physical body away. Now, I do think Itachi has potential counterplay to the Shinra Tensei, including the Chaotic Shinra Tensei. Itachi's Yata Mirror is supposed to be able to block any attack, and this is said multiple times. Some people may contest this, and say Itachi was knocked down from Kirin despite heavily implying he used the Susanoo to block it. The reason for this, however, brings up a limitation of the Yata Mirror, and that is it isn't omnidirectional. The Kirin caused a massive explosion when Sasuke used it. This massive blast means that the Yata Mirror had no way to block all of it, and thus the Susanoo was still affected by the blast. The Shinra Tensei, however, expands out from Pain, so Itachi can just focus the Yata Mirror in the direction of Pain to block the Shinra Tensei. Now Pain's strongest jutsu, the Chibaku Tensei. With this, Pain creates a black sphere that pulls everything towards it, creating a massive sphere of earth that traps away whoever is pulled in. This is probably Pain's most definitive path to victory, as there isn't a specific counter Itachi has to this. I know I just got done saying the Yata mirror blocks all attacks, but blocking the Chibaku Tensei doesn't really make sense. It isn't something that hits you and damages you, it just buries you and traps you. In fact, we see Itachi interact with Chibaku Tensei during the war, and he immediately decides to try and destroy the core. Along with this, Naruto says getting caught inside Chibaku Tensei is a game over, and Itachi doesn't seem to contest this at all. Itachi does end up destroying the core, along with the help of Bee and Naruto. This, however, isn't super relevant, as this is Nagato who is stronger than the passive Pain, and a stronger Itachi. As it stands, we don't know for certain, but there seems to be no evidence that Itachi could destroy Chibaku Tensei if Pain chooses to use it. Pain, however, only uses Chibaku Tensei as an absolute last resort. He didn't use Chibaku Tensei against Naruto until 5 of the 6 paths were destroyed, Naruto was losing control of the Nine Tails, and Shinra Tensei was shown to be ineffective on Naruto. Okay, I know there's a lot to go over, but I wanted to try to cover the main abilities for both fighters. Now I'll try to explain how I see this fight actually going with all of that laid out. Okay, I know that was a lot to go over, but I wanted to try and cover the main abilities for both fighters. I'll now try and explain how I see the fight actually going with all of that laid out. As established earlier, I don't see there being a massive speed gap between the two, and thus this fight really does come down to the abilities of both. I think pretty quickly in this fight, Itachi would attempt to take out the Pains with an Amaterasu. Itachi does know who Pain is, and that he's a very dangerous opponent, so him resorting to a powerful jutsu early on isn't unreasonable. In fact, we see Itachi use Amaterasu on Nagato in his summons as soon as he gains control of his body during the war, and if this happens, I don't see a way for any of the Pains to survive outside of the Diva Path using Shinra Tensei and the Preta Path using Jutsu Absorption. Pain in this case would be left with only 2 paths, and we funnily enough see Pain left with specifically the Diva Path and the Preta Path in his fight with Naruto. When this happened, he immediately used Universal Pull to bring Naruto to him, and then used the Preta Path to grab Naruto and attempt to steal his chakra. If Pain attempts this, I don't think Itachi would try to use a jutsu to counter, as Pain absorbed jutsu prior, and Itachi would likely take note of this. Itachi is one of the smartest fighters in the series, and is incredibly level-headed in combat. We see this when Itachi stays calm and works out the counter to Nagato's Chibaku Tensei almost instantly. Thus, I think what Itachi would do is try Tsukuyomi on the Preta Path. As I previously explained, the Tsukuyomi shouldn't do anything to the passive Pain, and this would only serve to fatigue Itachi. Now this leads into probably the biggest issue Itachi will have in this fight, and that's his stamina. Against Sasuke, Itachi used Tsukuyomi once, Amaterasu 5 times, and 1 fireball jutsu before collapsing to his knees from fatigue and going blind in his right eye. Assuming Itachi uses the Amaterasu in all the passive Pain, he will go blind in the right eye, and if he attempts Tsukuyomi once, he will be extremely compromised like against Sasuke. Despite the blindness and fatigue, Itachi was still capable of using Susanoo in the Sasuke fight. He not only managed to manifest it, but could also have a brief fight with Orochimaru and then walk over to Sasuke before finally dying. For Itachi, this fight really comes down to if he can take out the last 2 paths of Pain via the Susanoo before dying. The Tosuka Blade ceiling shouldn't be effective on Pain, but it can still be used like a regular sword and just cut through Pain. Pain, however, has a simple counter to Susanoo, which is just absorbing it. Once again, Susanoo is a jutsu, so nothing is stopping Pain from just sucking it away. I think it's becoming pretty clear by now how I see this fight resulting. Itachi will definitely take down several paths of Pain, and try a few things against the 2 that remain, but will have his jutsu countered and eventually use up his chakra in his attempts. Itachi's stamina is just too big of a problem in a fight with somebody who has so many counters to his strongest attacks. Obviously in a fight with as many variables as this, the specific scenario I laid out is just an example I came up with, based on previous fights the 2 had. But regardless, I see it playing out similarly. Itachi will ultimately die from overexertion like against Sasuke, or he will weaken to the point that Pain can finish him off. On top of this, Pain has some type of counter to everything Itachi has, but Itachi has absolutely nothing if Pain chooses to use Chibaku Tensei. This means Itachi both has to worry about defeating all 6 Pains before his stamina runs out, and killing the Diva Path before he resorts to Chibaku Tensei. This just means Itachi is fighting a massive uphill battle from the start, and he doesn't have the stamina to pull this off. Now this is all looking at Itachi when he is sick, but what about a fully healthy Itachi? We never see an alive Itachi who isn't ill fight. but we do see Edo Itachi during the war. This Itachi should be weaker than a hypothetical, alive, healthy Itachi, as Edo Tenseis are weaker than the alive counterparts. Using this version of Itachi, the result will be quite different. Once Itachi broke free of Kabuto's control, he was able to make quick work of a Nagato who had restored his youth and was no longer operating in an old, crippled body. Naruto directly implies that this Nagato was much stronger than the Pain he fought when speaking to Itachi. This is consistent with the fact that Itachi kept up with a Kurama Chakra Mode Naruto in a Taijutsu exchange. Naruto in the exact same encounter tells Nagato he's, quote, a lot stronger now than when I fought Pain, and as we established earlier, Pain was around the level of the Naruto that fought him. Taking all this into consideration, a fully healthy Itachi would destroy Pain. The only thing Pain maybe has is Chibaku Tensei, but he only uses as a last resort, and the gap is so large here he likely wouldn't get a chance to set it up. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, I would massively appreciate you liking and subscribing. I'm going to be putting out more videos like this weekly going forward, and hopefully delve into other series in the future.